Hey guys, on today's episode, I sat down again with Robin Black. If you want to go back and listen to the first episode, I should have done my research. It was, it was early. I know that much. I would say within the first 20 episodes. So it's been a while. I think we talked in December-ish. So yeah. Go check that episode out. We kind of picked up a little bit where we left off. Not a lot of MMA in this one, so if you're coming here just to listen to MMA, you'll probably be disappointed. But I don't think you will be, because Robin Black, if you know anything about him, he's a great guy. He's very fully layered. He does not just talk about MMA on his own podcast and stuff. So he was a fascinating guy. I was really happy to have him come on. So please listen to the interview. I hope you guys like it. I want to tell you about my newest sponsor, though, the Glen Avenue Soap Company. Please go check them out. It's glenavsoap.com. Is that correct? I need to make sure. glenavsoap.com. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just making that up. glenavsoap.com. That's GLENNAVESOAP.com. My personal suggestion would be their Bandits Oil Foam Soap. They are one of the very few all natural, all organic foam soaps on the market. It's a hard process from what I understand, and it's, obviously a much harder process when you factor in only using natural ingredients. So it's so good that the product is being sold by Whole Foods. So again, this isn't just some, they're not lying, I guess I should say. I mean, this has been validated. Big companies are selling it for them. That's a big deal. That it gives you some street cred. So I would definitely go suggest buying. My favorite scent was Bandits Oil. So please go check them out. Also check out the Voball. If you're a fan of the show, you already know this. The Voball, big supporters of the show, have been for a while now. Go to thevoball.com. That's TheVoball.com to learn more about the product. All right, without further ado, this is Robin Black.
You've got a gun, you've got a big gun, you've got a gun. It's not
All right, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the LoudMouth MMA podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Steele. Today, another interview, a returning guest. One of my favorite guests of all time is making another appearance, Robin Black. Good sir, how are you?
Dude, I'm very, very good, and it's a pleasure to be hanging out with you. We were talking before we went on the air. I got tickets for you and your wife for Kinky Boots in your town when my wife is there in a couple weeks.
Which is absolutely incredible, man. That's the only reason why we're doing this.
Yeah, totally. So she's in the show. She's one of the she's a swing, so it means she plays all the female roles. So I don't know what, if anything, she'll be playing when you're there, but we'll set you up, and then you guys go to the back and meet her, and she'll take you on a tour and show you all the boots and stuff. It's pretty cool, the costume.
That's so cool. Yeah, and it's at the locally, it's at the Victoria, which is an absolutely beautiful theater in downtown. It's actually, no joke, it is, we'll say a fifth of a mile from where I work. I mean, it's literally, I could just about throw a baseball, to the Victoria from where I work.
That's like half a kilometer.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's very, very close.
Wow.
So, but alrighty. Let's get, I've had you on before. I went back and I listened to that interview. There was nothing to really continue on. I did the same thing for Bruce. Although I will say, I had Bruce Buffer on twice in between talking to you for the first time. Because just listening to what we had talked about and then looking at the timeline of what I did a couple weeks after that, there was this. You motivated me, man. You really did. You got me motivated. You got me working harder. So maybe that's waning a little bit. So I got to get you back on. I got to get me excited again.
I'm so glad, man. And it's weird. It's like this is a common theme lately. And I don't know. I've always been super passionate and super driven. And then the more stuff I learn, I just want to tell other people about, having your day planner put together, and getting the right amount of sleep, and how to focus on getting shit done and stuff. It's just, I don't know. I've always kind of thought that way, and I've always tried to like encourage my good friends. And now that I have my own YouTube channel and stuff, it keeps being a theme of stuff that, you know, even my Ask Robin Black show and stuff. I guess it's, I don't know. It's a real compliment to hear that from you, anyways, man. It really is.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. I mean, listen, I appreciate your drive. I mean, I think success follows success. You know, if there is one thing to emulate, it's to emulate other people's success. And we talked about emulation a lot on the last interview. But yeah, man, I mean, being around successful people breeds success. People who are failing tend to be surrounded by other people who are also failing.
You're right.
And yeah, I mean, and that's something you have to notice around you. Notice that in your friend group, you know, and
you sometimes, so when you see these people around giving insight and stuff into their lives and how they're doing, sometimes you hear people talking about, oh, well, you gotta kind of get rid of certain people, and I don't believe in that. I have friends that go through tougher times, or, you know, just smoke pot all day for 6 months or whatever, and I'm going to hang in there and try to encourage them. There's a strange thing you'll start to see if you Google something. I don't know how they'll phrase it, but, you know, cut out a friend or whatever. Just because, yes, you want to be around people that are going places, but you can be the leader of that. You can lead a bunch of people.
Very true.
You know?
So I'll say that, so I definitely don't think in like cutting people out necessarily. Now, what I would say is, if you have people in your life who are discouraging you from growing, or who are discouraging you from doing what you want to do, because a lot of people have those people in their lives, and they're friends. They're not family. They're friends. And it's people who say, yeah, you shouldn't do that. Like, that's not going to work. Or like, that's going to be too hard. Or you're not going to make any money from that, or whatever it is. If you have people like that in your life, I would just say you don't necessarily need to cut them out, but you need to correct them.
Yes, if you can. So I've been married to my wife, Erica, for 5 years, and we've been together for 8. And before that, I was married, and I literally divorced my ex-wife when I told her that I was going to become a professional fighter. And win or lose, I was going to fight a couple times to understand what the thing that I loved more. Then I was going to become a commentator, and I was going to analyze fighting for a living. And she made fun of me and said that was a ridiculous, unachievable dream. And I divorced her ass.
Well, and then there you go.
I did. And it's not, I'm not trying to badmouth anybody. She's a really nice person and has a good life, and we say hello and when I see her. But literally, it wasn't that I was mad, and it wasn't that I was making a conscious decision saying I won't be able to achieve the things that I want with somebody who's, you know, has this attitude. I literally just looked at her, and I remember thinking very specifically, holy shit, she doesn't know me at all. Yeah. That was my thought. I was like, if you can look at me, if you know me as a friend or a brother or a son or an employee or anything, and you do not know me as somebody who, when they say they're going to do something, will go out, especially if it's something they're really passionate about, will go out and do it to the ends of the earth. If you don't know that about me, I shouldn't have married. We shouldn't be together. And I remember very specifically thinking, holy shit, she doesn't know me. You know, because when I did exactly, you know, that was 9 or 10 years ago, and in that time, I have done exactly what I said I was going to do.
Yeah, honestly, and I think that's kind of what I was saying, which is just like, you know, it's different if it's family. There's only so much you can do about that. But if you have friends who are discouraging you, man, I'd say, personally, I'm like, cut that out of my life. I have no desire for people who are going to, especially with the stuff like me, what I'm trying to do, because what I'm trying to do right now is hard work, and I can't have any negativity around me. I can't have it at all. You know, I need pure positivity in my life right now, because that's the only way this thing's going to work. So, you know,
it's true. And not only that, it's like, never mind the results of it. Just the living in a good perspective is just so much of a nicer life. Like, of course, it's great if positivity will lead to success. First, you know, we need to figure out what actually we define as success, because there are people that are worth $20 million who are miserable. You know, success is growing and actualizing yourself and learning things and feeling fulfilled and being happy. And if you do those things, you probably have a much better chance of paying your bills and acquiring, a comfortable place to live and stuff. But I think a lot of us look at it backwards. It's like, how do I get a big house? How do I make a lot of money? How do I buy a lot of stuff? Et cetera. And those things just do not result in happiness. You don't have to look very far. You don't have to Google very far to see that no matter how much you buy or what you buy, you've always dreamed of a Porsche. The feeling, your happiness quotient would be measured by a psychologist or whoever, whatever scenario, would rise greatly when you bought that Porsche. And whatever the number is, 6 weeks or 11 weeks later, it goes exactly to where it was. This is a fact. This is a fact of life. A bigger house, a nicer car, more money does not make you happier. So, success is the thing we got to figure out what that might look like.
Well, and it looks very different to different people. I mean, it looks incredibly different to different people, I don't really have good examples, but yeah, I mean, success to me, I could almost guarantee you does not look like success to everybody else.
No. I just, this is audio. We are chatting. But you and I just said hello to each other over Skype, and I could see you have this little setup where you can be super creative. In the background, you have a drum set that you can make art. You have a wife that you're going to take to a musical. You have fun. You pursue that is a form of success.
Oh, yeah.
That is success. And I think there's something we all want to do more. We all want to achieve more. It's natural. That's why we discovered America. That's why we moved to the moon. That's why there's penicillin. That's why everything is. There's a human nature to do more or achieve more or whatever. That's in humans. But we shouldn't do it at the expense of recognizing, the fact that if you're healthy and you're happy and somebody loves you, I think you and I might have talked about my friend in Cuba. And maybe we didn't. I have a friend in Cuba, and when I was sitting drinking rum with him and I could smell the ocean, he lived in a tiny place. He had no internet. He had never heard of, Paris Hilton or Beyonce, which is a good thing. He had a wife that he loved and a little place, and he ate every day. And he said, I have everything I could ever – he was the happiest guy I've known. And I went back and visited him about every 18 months for a 4 or 5 year period. It's been 10 years since I've been there, but I've sent him some messages. He had one friend with a email account, but this guy was so incredibly happy. And so happiness, you're right. It looks different to different people, and it changes at different times in your life too, I guess.
Well, and it comes down to a definition of happiness, because I think that's the root of success, or because when we talk about success, it tends to relate to being happy. So kind of the root of what we need to figure out is, what is our definition of happiness? Like, the way that I view it in my mind is, and this isn't like I want it to be this way. This is just how I think humans relate to happiness, which is it's this ratio of pleasure to pain. And the higher you are on the pleasure ratio, the happier you are, right? So the problem is over the last X amount of generations, where we have derived pleasure from has drastically changed. Where pleasure in 1823 was one thing. Pleasure in 2017 is the amount of friends you have on the internet.
Yeah.
Our whole pleasure center has completely changed. So happiness is that much harder to attain. And the other thing is, and real quick, I think the other thing for me is also expectations. Expectations can be a great thing, but expectations can also drive you off a cliff. This idea of you have this expectation of what this thing is supposed to do, or how this thing's supposed to be, or how this person is supposed to be, and what they're supposed to bring to you. And then when you don't meet that expectation, or when that thing or that person doesn't meet that expectation, we have such a hard time dealing with that. And I'm just wondering why. Why is that?
I think I agree with you 100% on expectation. There are regular things that your friend or you or your wife will do that is not in any way rude or offensive or intended to do something bad, but because somebody expected more or different from you or them, it ends up being a thing. So I agree with you without question on that. I'm not sure I agree on the pleasure versus pain.
Hey, that's good. Let's talk about that, because I am interested in what other people's definitions are. Because like I said, I don't even necessarily want it to be that. I just feel like that's how we as humans, like that's how we view happiness. It's not pleasure in like a very specific sense, but it is, to me, it's this pleasure versus pain. It's this, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I'm interested in what your definition is.
I know what you're getting at. I think that we can and do at our best go beyond that. Like I had a good friend, Dwayne. He passed away now, I'm going to say, maybe 5 years ago now. And his last days, he was in a lot of pain. You could see it. He had cancer, and he was in this this beautiful place that, a hospice, and you could go in there, and he was surrounded by his friends. And I swear to God, this guy was happy. Sure. And he was in a lot of pain.
Well, I think it's mind, body, and spirit. So I think physical pain can still be counterset by spiritual pleasure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm going to give this a lot of thought, and I'm going to circle back to it. I'm going to do a little bit of reading on it. But I believe, I know what you're saying, and I think that is how we act. Like say pleasure, today we'll make, there's little tiny serotonin releases that happen when you see a click or a like or something on social media. And we've culturally trained people to have those little micro doses of serotonin. But that's not really pleasure. And in a lot of cases, pain, there are people in all kinds of pain that can still be happy. I think we're getting into some deep shit.
I like it.
Yeah, me too. A lot of this kind of thing, to me, whether you're studying martial arts, which of course is what we often circle back to, because that's a focus of how we view the world, or yoga, or meditation, one of the things you start to discover is pleasure and pain are things we're defining. Like our perspective is saying whether something is pleasure or pain. And I don't know that those are actually incredibly real things when you get down to the essence of who we are. I'm now thinking out loud about things that I haven't thought about before.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't have any area of expertise on this. And what I like about this conversation is when I leave it, no matter what we get to now, I'm going to leave this conversation desperate to find some answers to why I don't think what you're saying is actually what we're after. But I don't know why that is. I feel a visceral response that's a way that we're interpreting the world around us, but I don't know that I believe it's real.
Well, and it's somewhat platitudinal, and it's like kind of or like derisive. If I'm saying that right, yeah. I mean, it's you're really deducing this thing down to its most basic elements. I typed in happiness into Google because I was just interested in what would pop up. Happiness quotes, and here's a great one, and it hits on the expectation thing. It's from Michael J. Fox, who of course has had Parkinson's for quite some time now,
and is presumably in pain.
And pretty much took away much of his acting. I mean, it made acting nearly impossible for him. He said, "My happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance and in inverse proportion to my expectations."
That's amazing. Yeah.
So
amazing.
That kind of full circle. I mean, because I think expectations are, and it's expectations, and it's also this idea that what you're going through is always worse than what everyone else has gone through. It's this. There's a lyric by a band called Fireworks that I'm a big fan of, and the lyric is, "I like to think that everyone's hell is better than my own." And I that is one of the just a brilliant lyric, because that's exactly people suffer from this all the time, and they walk around with these giant things on their shoulders, kind of this scarlet letter to a certain extent, walking around, thinking that what's happening to them has never happened to anyone before, right? Or even if it has, that the fact that it's happening to them now is somehow worse. Right. And you kind of see the inverse and this is something we talked about last interview, because I went back and listened to it as a refresher. We had talked about kind of nostalgia and how we always want to harken back to these days where things were always better, right? There's this mystical, it's like when people use the word they to describe something where they go, well, they don't want you to know that. Who?
Right.
Who doesn't want you to know that? Yeah, just
right.
say who. Don't say they. Like, be more specific. Because people tend to victimize themselves without even really trying to. But I think you also have a big. I mean, I'm saying 15 different things that have 15 different conversations attached to them. But yeah, I mean, I guess like the thesis of what I'm trying to say, like if people want to be happy, it's have reasonable expectations and accept what happens and continue to strive for what it is that you want.
Well, we just brought it back to my lens for the world. You know, how I interface with the world is through the lens of trying to connect it to any situation that I'm in to the martial arts. Right? If somebody passes your guard and you're freaked out about it, and you're not accepting it, you perform a lot worse than, he passed my guard. I know how to work from cross-side, from underneath cross-side. My mission is not scarier or weirder or, oh my God, that just happened. He's in top cross-side. I'll perform step 1, 2, and 3 to get back. Oh, he passed a little further. Oh, I'm mounted. If you panic and you do not accept that you're in mounted, you're like, damn it, I can't believe I'm mounted, you're in trouble. If you calmly assess, I've been mounted before, and you deal with it straight on, you're fine. And that tends to, that kind of acceptance of where you are and ability to work from where you are will always make things smoother. And then what was the other point that you just made? Not just accepting, the other one was...
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, I'm trying to remember. I think I had a good quotable moment, though. I'll have to go back and listen and write that down. That's the first time I ever said that.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, it's accepting. It's having a reasonable expectation to what's happening, accepting what does happen, and then striving to get what it is that you actually want.
Yes, actually, that is very, very, very succinct, and I agree. So, first of all, our expectations. When you go, the fear and anxiety you have if you've had a fight, if you've fought and failed, your expectation of what could happen, your sort of viewing of the future, like you were saying earlier, is going to be worse than the actual scenario. Getting punched in the face a bunch of times and it hurting, even, the stresses of the fight itself are not as bad as you imagine them to be. But if what you imagine, you start to think that's real, you experience it. It's also, you're so right, realistic view of it, a realistic expectation of it, acceptance of where you are, and what was the last thing? And then
striving for what it is that you actually want,
exactly.
for the thing that you didn't attain the first time around.
Exactly. So now he did pass the mount. We strive to get back to where we were. It's very, that was very nicely put.
Well,
I agree.
I'm glad. Sometimes you say stuff and then you go back and listen to it and you're like, oh, that wasn't as cool as I thought it was. But I feel like that one's going to hold up. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Hopefully that one holds up.
Yeah, I like it. But,
I think I might have lost you.
There was something. And what is cool about having a conversation with somebody without all these strange rituals of commercials and intros and weird voice where we have to say it's a great opportunity to be employed, all that shit is you can think out loud. You can be wrong. You can come up with an idea. There's somehow podcasting and open-ended conversations have removed the fear of sounding stupid. It's okay to sound stupid. I mean, it's okay to, which is why when I'm talking about ideas, like taking your tennis serve of an idea, I'm not afraid to try to sound it out and think it out and try it on for size. You know what I mean? I think that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
we're not experts. We're trying to figure out answers, you know? And I think there's something really enjoyable about that.
I think there's something poetic about living in uncomfortableness and just living in that and being okay with being uncomfortable. You know, I've been uncomfortable during stuff. I mean, during interviews. I mean, fortunately, I treat interviews like conversations. Yeah. A lot of people don't do that with interviews. They treat them, I think, like interviews, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. But I treat my interviews like conversations. So generally speaking, they're much more comfortable.
For sure. But you said there's something wrong with that. And there isn't, but it's dated. It's retro. And that's okay, too. Sometimes you like to listen to classic rock. Sometimes you like to watch an old game show or whatever. But interviews were created. So there's this strange. So I've worked in television. I work in, I still commentate some television. I work a lot in digital now. And there's been this strange, uncomfortable relationships over the last decade between the creator and the producer. And I say that with some of my best friends being producers and some people I've learned incredible things in my life from. Bobby T and Glennie Mack at Fight Network are brilliant producers that I learned a ton from. Record producers, I worked with Bob Ezrin, who made Pink Floyd The Wall and Kiss Destroyer and some of the big records ever. And I made a record with Garth Richardson, who was the guy to kind of get Rage Against the Machine to sound the way they were supposed to sound. So I worked with some genius in productions. But there's something where the person kind of behind the scenes in trying to shape something ends up affecting how it is. And it makes this dry sort of structured thing. And whether we're watching the NFL or the UFC or, a newscast, there's this almost ritualistic structure that exists. It'll be the same shot. So even I'll use the UFC, for example, because that's what we love, right? And even though we love it, there's this weird ritualistic structure there.
Yeah.
Opening shot of either the arena, or if we're in New York City, we'll see the Statue of Liberty. If we're in Rio, we'll see Jesus the Redeemer. And then the voiceover will be directed by somebody else. Anik would, or whoever would do what they might do creatively, but their boss will say, all right, we're going to need a read as this opens, where you'll hear the voice of the main guy saying, and here we are at beautiful Rio de Janeiro for UFC something, something, something. Here is a shot of Jesus the Redeemer, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Then we go on cam and say, I'm John Anik, and listen, John is not only a friend of mine, but somebody I admire very greatly. So I'm just using him to illustrate production.
That Brazil shot, by the way, is every time I watch a movie and I'm trying to figure out whether they are or are not on location in Brazil, I look for that statue. Because if you see the flyover of that statue, you're like, they're not actually in Brazil. they paid for that.
Yeah, exactly. They use the copter shot.
Yeah.
So let's say, or here we are, here's a shot of beautiful Madison Square Gardens. Or maybe there's a guy in front with a microphone. I'm here in front of Madison Square Gardens. Then we go to the shot. I'm here, John Anik here, joined by Dominic Cruz, Daniel Cormier, and Yves Edwards. Guys, we got a hell of a main event coming up.
Yeah.
Then they will each make a 25-second comment on that main event. Yeah. Then we'll go, and let's go down to Joe Rogan and the other guy. What's that other guy's name? Not Anik.
Brian Stan?
No, the other play-by-play guy.
Came from the new guy, Todd Grisham.
And we'll go down to Todd Grisham and Joe Rogan at cage side. It'll be the same two shot of those guys. All right, Joe, and it'll be shot for shot for shot. Why is it like that? Well, the answer is it's like that because if you're going to do 40 shows a year, you need to make structure. The problem is we live in a world where you listen to podcasts, you look at Instagram posts, you are on Facebook, we're on YouTube. You see all of these things. We're all changing as human beings in what we're observing and consuming and talking about and all of this kind of stuff. And that weird ritualistic kind of stuff is still happening with the NBA or the UFC or, the news. And it's so fucking strange to me. I look at it now and I can't believe – when are we going to shatter that? Is it in 6 months? Is it in 3 years? Is it never? Like, why do we do it exactly the same? And for some of the audience, that's very comforting. You know,
well,
it's part of.
It's like this. Humans are they're creatures of habit, and not creatures, but humans look for patterns. Like just innately in what they are, they look for patterns. So if you're looking for patterns and you're a creature of habit, and I think the two things are very connected,
I agree.
You're going to be attracted to something that's always the same. I mean, it's this way in advertising. I've been interviewing for sales jobs recently, and it's fascinating to me. You know, people still advertise in the phone book.
That's insanity.
It's 2017.
That's
People still
insane.
advertise in the phone book.
Yeah.
The phone book still exists in the first place. Not even that people advertise in it. The fact that somebody's still keeping that thing around is fascinating to me. I mean,
it's freaky though. Like, so, you know, I was working in television until only a couple of months ago. So the second that you become, you know, not employed by television, there's, you know, my job, like you say, is to analyze patterns. I watch Cub Swanson long enough to be able to identify how he moves. Once I see how he moves, I study Brandon Gibson, one of his coaches, to see how he trains him. I use that to draw patterns in how this will happen against the other fighter, where he has done this often, but I also know he's made these changes and he performs better on and that study of the martial arts becomes a study of change and a study of patterns and a study of the evolution of the technology of fighting. So all of a sudden, I had a job on Monday, and I no longer have a job on Tuesday. You must immediately begin to study the change, the patterns, the evolution of the business that you're in. Why would a company where you worked all of a sudden not have an entire department? Something has changed. So I start to look at it. And newspapers, radio, television, the yellow pages, any of these things, they start to shrink. Why do they? So you picture two waves. In your left hand, you are now holding a wave and you're pointing your hand down. So that is that old style of technology. Yep. So that wave is going down. As it's going down, less people are buying it or watching it or reading it or listening to it, right? As that happens, less and less and less and less, they start to lose a bit of money. But more importantly for that wave is, how did they exist to begin with? They existed because people spend money to advertise in that. Why do they advertise there? Because people are paying attention to it. Wait, less people are paying attention to it. We shouldn't necessarily advertise there. And even more importantly, do you have a TV anywhere near you?
I don't. It's upstairs, but...
Okay, pretend there's a TV in front of you.
Yep.
You're looking at that. Do you have your phone in your hand?
I do.
So you're looking at the TV that you're imagining is in front of you. A commercial hits, you look at your hand.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Not only are less people viewing or reading or listening to the radio or reading your newspaper or getting the yellow pages, but even when the ad happens, they're immune to it or they look at the thing in their hand, the device in their hand. If you are somebody who buys advertising, why would you buy advertising in a place that less people are watching, and even when they are watching, when your ad hits, they move to a different platform? You would be buying it in the ad on the machine in your hand. That's where they're looking. The reason you advertise is to get attention so people will see your product or service. So that's happening. When that happens, that wave, that left hand that's pointing down, that wave suddenly has to get rid of cut things. And so they start cutting valuable resources. So all of a sudden, let's say Robin Black is one of these resources. So he just floats up into the space there. Now, all of those advertisers who are no longer buying advertising, they're sitting around going, well, we have these budgets. We need to buy advertising. We just don't know where to buy it yet. And the answer is you buy it where the attention is. Yep. And so in your right hand now, there's a wave going up. And that wave is digital. And that wave is podcasts. And that wave is the Joe Rogan Experience or Fighter and the Kid or whatever. And as that wave climbs, it gets bigger and bigger, more and more attention. And more importantly, that audience, Joe Rogan, for example, Joe's audience isn't just, wow, some people are listening to this. They like Joe. They trust Joe. They relate to Joe. They understand Joe.
And Joe is Walter Cronkite. I mean,
exactly.
he is
Only
Walter
thing
Cronkite.
is, he's fucking cool.
Yeah.
And he's honest. So if a bow hunting company goes to Joe and Joe loves that fucking bow, he'll be like, to all his listeners, he'll be like, guys, these guys gave me money, but let me tell you, I use this bow and I love it. It's 10 times the value of some garbage commercial that you put on the radio or some, photo shoot that you put in a newspaper or whatever. It's a human being. They call them influencers. I think that's a nerdy kind of thing, but creators and influencers. But Joe is naturally, without doing anything, just by being himself, he influences other people. So all of a sudden, that world is growing. So when I suddenly, as an asset that creates stuff that people like, becomes free, all of those companies are who's coming after you. And it's happening because ESPN just cut 300 people. From what I heard, I could have that number wrong, but it cut a ton of people.
Which is incredible. I mean, if we all thought, and I know this directly impacted you, so I'm not trying to belittle the situation, but if we all thought what happened to Fight Network was bad, look, ESPN I can't even define how much bigger they are than Fight Network. And
thousands of times bigger. But here's the crazy thing. Here's what's just bizarre. And this is kind of what I was saying about that exact same shot and the exact same thing at the desk. The world changes around you. So if you are ritualistically going through life, completely unwilling to change, the life is a moving river. And if you swim to the shore and set up a camp on shore, it'll just go raging by you. Yeah. And eventually, it's way off in the future and you can't relate. And what happened is, what is so bizarre is, let's say of those hundreds of people, that 20 of them, have 1 million Instagram followers. They're some of the biggest names that cover basketball or football or whatever. Not only did they not understand where the attention is going, which is to human beings that people care about and connect with on an organic level. They release those instead of seeing that's where the future of their business is. But not only that, they make 300 competitors. Those people don't just disappear. They take with them the committed audience. If you're the basketball guy, you fucking love basketball, and you were on ESPN for 5 years, and all these people trust you, they don't care about a logo or a screenshot or 4 letters. They care about Dave, the basketball guy, and Dave has dedicated his life to being the basketball guy, and he doesn't just disappear. He takes with him a segment of the audience that never turns ESPN on ever again. And these companies aren't understanding that. They're cutting their future. The future is human beings who connect with other human beings. There's nowhere else you could spend your money, which is why anybody who makes a good podcast, at least there are young, cool, intelligent, future-looking companies that are always willing to connect with them and help them do their thing. So it's a fascinating landscape, which I knew a little bit about, but in the last couple of months I've learned so much about it and just seen these patterns,
So I'm I don't know what you know, what you don't know, but I'm starting, have been for a while now, the LoudMouth network. So that's where I've been going now. Eventually, I will probably step away from LoudMouth MMA, just to focus on the network. I already have So LoudMouth MMA is me. I'm going to give everyone a shout out. LoudMouth NFL is Derek Barnes. LoudMouth Boxing is Blake Stevens. LoudMouth Wrestling is LK. LK also contributes to LoudMouth Racing, and I'm getting a NASCAR guy in for that as well. There's going to be 2 or 3 hosts over there at LoudMouth Racing. And then there's other podcasts, Craft Brewed Sports being one of them. Really great podcast. Scott and Mike, they're on now as they're not a LoudMouth branded, but they're a podcast that's now on the network that was pre-existing. And one of the things that we're doing is building up Facebook Live infrastructure.
Awesome.
So for me personally, that's where I see the future. I think Facebook Live is the future.
Look at you crazy motherfucker. That is awesome. I agree. I think, what is Facebook Live, right? Facebook is a place we all hang out. It's somehow a bar and a restaurant and a park. You know what I mean? Where we're all kind of hanging out. And sometimes, but while we're hanging out there, we're getting, stuff from yesterday and stuff. Whereas Live is at the park, somebody is juggling or singing or performing. You know, that is really, really crazy.
Well, and I also see it in like, so one of the issues with TV is that you have to be somewhere at a certain time. Which, like, that's not how we are anymore. We are way past that. I mean, we were past that 10 years ago.
Right.
We're certainly past right now. Well, that's like think of what Sports Center was. Like that Sports Center makes no sense if you look at the current paradigm and how quickly news comes out and where people are getting said news, right, through Twitter or whatever. Sports Center was completely antiquated and still is, and I know it's still happening. I don't have cable, so I don't know, but I assume it's still happening. You know, and that's a very, very antiquated thing there. I mean, just horribly antiquated. And but TV itself is horribly antiquated, and that you have to be somewhere at a certain time. What I like about Facebook Live, though, is that you can get the best of both worlds, where if you bring up this Facebook Live infrastructure, you can have shows that are at set times, right? So you have live content. You say it's LoudMouth Boxing. LoudMouth Boxing is from 5:30 to 6 on Mondays.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can have the best of both worlds. You can have the live content where if you want to watch it in real time, you can. And if you are one of the lucky ones, not one of the lucky ones, but if you're one of the people that enjoys watching it in real time, you can then interact in real time where you can't do that with TV. But conversely, after it's done recording, you don't have to be there at a certain time. You can just go onto the page and access it.
Yeah, you're bang on, because so fighting is my thing, right? I like to talk about life, and I like to talk about, but whether we're talking about technology, or we're talking about, life, I'm generally filtering it through the martial arts because that's who I am. So my world is going to be people who are talking about fighting. I can Facebook Live during the fights, and although we could put that up later and people would watch, who would be living, hanging out with me during the fights? People who want to engage, people you can chat with and you can discuss shit with, which will excite me too. Facebook Live isn't for the same people who think the same way as Sports Center, like you said. Yeah. They're for people who want to contribute ideas. They're for people who want to argue an idea. They're for people who are also in the moment. So they're the deepest of all connections that you have. They're like, when I'm watching fights, who am I going to be the most connected with? Some other weirdo in Canada or Dayton or Japan or wherever, who is so deep in it that he feels like, I'm opening a beer, by the way. That's the sound of that.
Hey, it's a beautiful sound. What are you drinking?
I got a Stella, but I have Sapporo in the fridge because I've been motivated to have Sapporo sponsor my stuff because
I like it. Hey, yeah. I do that all the time. It's so funny. Keith, who does my news shows, he always calls me out because I drop brand names and I'll drop them all the time because I'm like, hey man, like if I like something, I want those people to know that I like it, so they'll contact me. And it's worked once, it'll work again. I think being straight, dead honest is the way to go. Where I'll literally say, hey, yeah, I really like this beer or sandwich or T-shirt. Man, I hope they can send me some free ones. People respect that. Everybody would love a free T-shirt. Me too, all the time. All the time.
Everybody would love a free T-shirt. I think that the time of acting and creating it's talking in code. I am very careful to not get super political because of how two sides can argue and both look at each other like they're crazy, and maybe they're both crazy. But when the president of the United States was able to capture, at least among the things, was capture somebody's imagination because every single politician for 50 years had spoken exactly the same way. They've spoken weird politician language. Yep. After a while, it's just nonsense. And that's what I'm suggesting happens at the desk of a NFL game. Is eventually, like, they put the camera will scan to the second guy, and he'll say, you know what, this is one of the greatest heavyweight fights we've ever seen. He's got knockout power in both hands. The way this guy cuts angles is something very special to behold. And it's like, dude, people don't fucking talk that way.
I know.
They don't talk that way. And which was why politicians, you didn't trust them anymore, because nobody speaks that way. It's 2017. Language evolves, humans evolve, our perspective of the world evolves, but NFL Sunday doesn't evolve.
Yeah.
And it doesn't evolve because they go through the same system. That producer was taught by a teacher who had always done it this way, and he tells his people to do it that way. And it just, in a world where what you're describing with Facebook Live is starting to get more views than some official things from, whether it's Bellator or the NBA or whoever, that's a world where you have to change. The audience is different. It becomes weird and ritualistic. So we were saying the way that you consume, whether it's a fight or, music or whatever, it starts at one point we like the comfort in it. We like the repetition. We like the pattern. Eventually it's just so retro that only old people watch it. Young people coming up will never watch the Oscars, or they may never watch the NFL unless they start to understand that they don't view the world the same way. It just looks like shit their parents watched, you know?
Yeah. No, man, I am like 100% with you here. I mean, it's something I notice all the time, and I commentate it. And listen, I fall victim to it too. That there are definitely times where I'm doing my podcast and I'm doing a breakdown and I'm phoning it in.
Sure.
And there are times where I'm doing interviews because earlier I said I like to have conversational interviews. Yeah, first of all, not every fighter wants to have a fucking conversation with me. So, like there are times where I have to just have this really just like, so what gym are you? You know what I mean? Like you have to do those things.
There's a certain, but you might find yourself in a place where it's like, the only reason we're talking to each other is you have a fight coming up, or you're selling, your new whatever, and I'm here because I need a guest on Wednesday, and that is real. And in those situations, what I would say, and what I'll hope that I do that I'll take my own advice on this, is just fucking try something way different.
Yeah.
The two options are fall into the pattern, and so really. Well, yeah, it's been the best, training camp I've ever had. Really? What have you been working on? Oh, I improved my wrestling, but I'm training in all areas. If it goes to the ground, I can submit him. If it's on the feet, I can knock him out. Wherever this fight goes, I'm ready to go. Okay.
You know what I do, Robin?
What the fuck are you saying to me?
I know. Here's what I do in my interviews. And again, this isn't true across the board. So if I have like those really nerdy listeners, I get it, nerds. I don't do it all the time. If you're going to go back and pull clips of me having this conversation, don't do it. I already know I do it. But it's like I got to talk directly to the nerds. But,
you're just lucky to have nerds.
I know. Like, I love them.
Anybody who has deep, nerd is a polite thing that we use now. A fanatic, fan is derived from the word fanatic. If you're lucky enough to have fanatics, we are very, very lucky to have.
Robin,
go on.
I played Magic the Gathering, so I cannot make fun of anybody ever. I had lost all excuses to make fun of anybody once I fell in love with Magic the Gathering. All right, so. I do this, right, where I get in those types of conversations. But here's what I do. And a lot of times when I have fighters on, I don't even talk about the fight they're having.
You and I haven't barely talked about fighting at all today.
And we haven't talked about, listen, there's some yeah, go ahead, please.
I haven't talked about fighting within 30 minutes. Often I get a little stressed out, but I'm enjoying this immensely.
That's funny. No, and it's like, listen, you're known as a breakdown guy. We already know that. When I reached out to people and I said, hey, I'm going to have Robin Black on, here's, what kind of questions do you have? Overwhelmingly, the questions that people have relate to breakdowns because you are one of the best in the business of doing it. And so naturally people are going to gravitate towards that. But to be honest with you, I already know that about you. I'm not really interested in that kind of stuff. I'm interested in just talking to you. I don't really... it's not that I'm not like, I would love to learn your secrets, but honestly, what I think your secret is that you work really fucking hard. Like, I think that's what the secret is.
That is. There's no secrets. If you put in thousands of hours into learning anything and then find the parallel things that matter. Oh shit, I I'm using the same words. I have to study poetry. Oh, I don't know how to find the right timing on something. I got to study rhythm. First you study fighting like crazy, then you study television, and then you study rhythm, and then you study all of the parallel things, and you study the mental part of it, then you study psychology, then you study the physiology of the body. That's it. You just fucking work like crazy. The only way you can do that is if you obsessively love something. Nobody's going to do it. There are people out there who will do something once or twice, they get a result that they like, and then they try to get the result again. You can't put in 70 hours a week chasing a result. You can only put in 70 hours a week because you're driven to do it, because you're driven by your curiosity. And there's no other answer. Realistically speaking, the only way any winning or being successful or achieving something, the only way you do it is find something that you love so deeply that you will do it for free. And then you do it for free until eventually somebody pays you to do it.
Yeah. But yeah, because that's obviously a question that I got. I'm sure you get it a lot, which is like, how are you able to do this? Or what's the secret? Or what's the trick? Or what's your suggestion for people who are handicapping, right? I get those questions a lot. And sometimes they're not all created equal. I mean, I had a guy ask me a question today about handicapping. He was like, hey, like, what's his advice? Like, I'm a gambler, I've done a lot of stuff, but obviously Robin's on a different level. Like, what, like, did he turn to books? It was a good question. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but he worded it in a way that I really respected, because I know he was asking a question that a lot of people have asked, but he did it in a way where I think he was being more specific, and he was basically saying, like, listen, I already do a lot of work. I want to get to that next level.
Yeah, that's cool.
How do you get to that next level? So I'll ask him. Just for him, I will ask that question. Kind of what's your advice? Someone who already works really hard, right? Because they do. And I will say this, too, to that person. I had an interview. Like I said, I've been interviewing a lot for sales positions recently. And in my interview, I'd asked the guy kind of how he defined success in sales, or a successful salesman, or just a salesman in general, because that's a question that they had asked me, like, how do I define it? So I wanted to flip the script at the end of the interview and say, well, how do you define a salesman? And he basically said, listen, you know what? I don't really define a salesman as anything, because everyone comes in such different packages. But at the end of the day, it's all about results. And he said, I'll tell you, some of the hardest working people that I've ever seen, I have fired, because they do not have the results. And at the end of the day, that's all that I care about. I don't care how hard you're working. Which I know that sounds really harsh to some people, but first of all, he's in sales. He's not, I mean, that's what he does. But he's just like, listen, hard work doesn't necessarily mean that you're working on the right thing. So I would say, I think that would be a part of the advice, which is working hard. It's like this idea, like Gary Vaynerchuk talks about. I don't know if you've listened to Gary V at all, but
I actually know Gary. We've chatted about my breakdowns, and he gave me, when I started my YouTube channel, he gave me 5 members of his creative team for a half-hour conference call.
Send him my way, because I love Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah, he's a great guy. That's incredible.
He really is, and so I'm going to be in New York. The reason I won't be in Dayton when my wife is playing there is because I'm going to be in New York doing something for TSN, which is like Canada's ESPN, on George St. Pierre. But I'm sending messages to Lindsay, who's kind of one of Gary's main, and I messaged Gary, and he's responded in email a few times. But I'm going to try to set up, and Lindsay's like, when you're in New York, come visit the office. So I'm going to at least shoot something there. I'd like to be able to shoot something with Gary, but he's very busy and he's in different countries all the time and stuff. But for people who don't know, you probably talk about him occasionally on your podcast, but the reason I connect with Gary, now I work in the digital world, so he's a guru, and I don't know if he likes that word, but it's true. But the reason I connected with him well before I was in this is I view almost everything in the world philosophically through the study of martial arts and how it changes. And watching it change constantly shaped how I think. And Gary is identical through technology and business. And when I was listening to him, it wasn't just, wow, it's neat. How does Instagram work? Well, that could be valuable. It was, wow, this guy is watching the world change and anticipating its change. And that's what I've sort of focused in on doing with the martial arts, is being able to identify which moment of shift isn't just, wow, cool, this happened, but it's a signal of how people are training and how the sport is going to change. And Vaynerchuk, for people who are listening who have never watched, he's breaking out enormously. He watched the snowball going. He was on Rogan's podcast too. But he is I'm an enormous Andy Warhol fan. I went to Pittsburgh to the Andy Warhol Museum, which I would recommend to anybody. Andy Warhol was a futurist, but Gary has a lot in common with Andy Warhol in seeing the future of technology. But the future of technology, the future of martial arts, the future of business, the future of, all of these things, once you see that everything is in a constant state of flux, like you said earlier, it's easier to map things out. If you understand what's happening with real estate, which I do not, but if you did, you would know whether you should sell your house or buy two houses.
Yep. It's the same thing with MMA podcasting. I mean, just to go really deducing way down here. I mean, same thing with MMA podcasting. I'm already seeing first of all, there's too many. I know that you're in it, so I'm not like talking trash or whatever, but there's so many MMA podcasts. So I'm like, okay, how in the world can I differentiate myself? And I'm constantly trying to figure that out. And for the 211 breakdown coming up, I think it's the next step of that evolution. I'm going to be doing something a little different, starting there and moving forward. So I'm just going to keep doing whatever I can to keep trying to change, even if it's little bits at a time.
Yeah. Well, that brings us right back to where you started as we went towards Gary and his.
Yeah, I think he talks a lot about execution. Which is
the variable is talent and the variable is the creative.
Yeah.
And so, if there's 1,000 of them and you're more talented or work harder or both, you'll differentiate yourself. But the conversation started because somebody was asking about what the key is. And from this part of the conversation, two come to mind. One is learn to see change and learn to understand that everything in the world that you experience is changing constantly. If you don't understand that, and as long as you don't understand that, it's going to be hard to go where you're going. Your question was about analyzing fighting. Well, we must understand that what we saw 6 months ago may be irrelevant, or it may shape something we'll see now, or it may shape the future of something. Rules, and I'm using quotations, that applied. I mean, when I hear somebody talk about Southpaw versus Orthodox and the front foot must be on the outside, that's absolute fucking bullshit. That's bullshit. Those are novice truths that have changed as I see you, my opponent, keeping your front foot on the outside and saying to yourself, I must keep my front foot on the outside because of A, B, and C. I change and adapt so that I penalize you for that. When somebody says you have to have the underhook, so we all train to fight for the underhook. If I lose the fight for the underhook, I guess I'm fucked. Or if instead you develop the overhook so that let him, rather than fight for the underhook, let him have it, but become so talented with the overhook in ways that he can't understand that you win, right? Once you understand that, so you're looking for that, looking to understand that it's not just an issue of figure out what you see, but figure out what it will mean when somebody else realizes that you, the fighter, making the decision to believe this is true and living as if it's true, I can operate around you and penalize you for believing that. And that's the shape of things. So we need to understand that. But once we understand that, if somebody is asking you, how do I become great at breakdowns? Don't become great at breakdowns, because in the 3 years it'll take you, breakdowns will not mean anything to anybody, because I will have done 900, Dan Hardy will have done another 600, and etc., and they'll evolve into something else. You have to start to see how the world changes, how the audience changes, how thinking changes, how the martial arts change, and start to anticipate what that'll be in 5 years, and then put in the 5 years of hard work and be ready to pivot when you're wrong. And that's it. That's fucking it. And you won't learn that at the beginning. So what you have to learn at the beginning are the fundamentals. You can't learn to do a spinning kick till you learn how to kick and move your feet. So you have to learn to do that. And there's no shortcut. 5 years from now, let's say you're starting, and not that you'll be, I'm not saying as you, I'm saying the person who would say, I would love to break down fights. That person in 5 years, I'll be 5 years better, and so will everybody else that's ahead of them. So they should figure out something different, because I'll have 15 years in it when they have 5. Or learn the reality of where, the front end of it is, and then build on that. But it's challenging. It's fucking challenging. There's no shortcut. You're better off to disrupt than to try to imitate or to try to join in. You're better off to figure out what the disruption will be 5 years from now, or what disruption you can build 5 years from now, and work towards that. And what it won't be is interviewing people exactly like Ariel and the 100 people who copied him, because Ariel's the biggest at what he does. The 100 who imitate him are not, and they won't be.
And he's incredible at it. I mean,
he's great at it.
Yeah, he has no fear. He has no fear in asking questions, and
he's very, very talented. Ariel and I are friends, although people seem to think for whatever reason that we're not. Even although at the same time, I've never had. Ariel and I are very different in the way that we see fighting and the way that we see the world around fighting. So I'd rather disrupt him. Not because I don't love the guy personally and want him and his wife and his 2 kids to be successful, but I would like to have people look at that and go, wow, is that ever retro, talking about Twitter beefs and shit? Instead, you should talk about the martial arts themselves. Because my goal isn't to be like him or Rogan or somebody else. My goal is to disrupt that. And that whoever is looking at it and they're 22 years old and they'd like to be deep in their love of martial arts for some type of living at 30, they got to look strictly digital, or maybe even they have to be looking at what do you call it, virtual reality. You got to be, if you're 22, by the time you're going to be successful in the field of fighting, you'll be 29. That's 7 years from now. Maybe VR is where it's at. Yeah. Or maybe it's some other thing, and you should start becoming the guy in that. Figure out what that path looks like so that 4 years from now, you're the guy.
And here's the thing, and it's all about execution, right? To kind of go full circle with it, and then I know I got to let you go here. But yeah, to go execution. So like Robin just said, Robin just came up with a really good idea, which is be the guy who goes into virtual reality when it comes to, say, MMA or MMA breakdowns or even like an MMA podcast, right?
Or basketball or podcasting
sure, exactly.
Or cooking shows or whatever. You should, if you're 22 years old, you should be figuring out how to be that guy at 27.
And then the second tier to that is that the same people who heard him say that, right? Let's just say X amount of people heard him say that, right? Of those X amount, only a much smaller chunk is actually going to try to do it. Okay.
Yep.
And then of the people that actually try to do it, most of them are going to do so shitty. So the big thing is, as long as you go into it and as long as you do it better than everybody else, that's what's going to matter. It's the execution. It's not just the idea.
The sad and scary truth is, no matter how you slice it, you still have to kick ass at it and outwork everybody and learn and sacrifice. You have to sacrifice. If you and my dog Pluto sitting next to me and this inanimate remote controller, all 3 people, and we all decide that for the next 5 years we have an idea that we think might work, and let's say it might. The one of us who doesn't watch Netflix, and the one of us who dates less, and the one of us who doesn't blow our money on a car so we have to earn other stuff, and the one who makes all the sacrifices will have the best chance of doing it.
Amen.
That is the shitty truth.
Yep.
There are people, and you get it when you're building a podcast empire, and I get it in the world that I work in, and anybody who's doing anything will get it, from people around them, or somebody's like, oh, that guy got lucky, or why can't I do that? It's like, because you're not willing to put in 60 hours a week for 12 years. And even if you did, you might fail. And most people are really scared of failure. But we shouldn't be scared of failure. Failure is the thing that helps you succeed. You have to fail. You have to. Like, you have to go in.
Patience. Nobody has patience.
Go in and each failure helps you sharpen the pencil till you can write the check. You know what I mean? And you have to go fail. You have to fail a bunch. And you have to get comfortable with it and realize it's not embarrassing at all. And there is a whole world of people who now recognize failure as part of the path. And a lot of young people really recognize that. And not all of them, because there's a lot of young people and old people and all people who are scared to do anything because they might fail. But then there are swaths of people who realize, failure is part of success. The path to success is mandatory, that there are failures on the way. So get your first one under your belt, realize the world doesn't end, it'll be very painful, and then keep going.
Amen. Amen, my friend. All righty. First of all, part 3, a couple months from now?
Yes, absolutely.
Part 3.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, DM me the week that Kinky Boots is in your town. DM me, and I will put you and your wife, and I'll ask if I can get 4 so you guys can bring some friends too. But, my wife's the boss. I'll let you know how that goes.
Of course. All righty. Yeah. Anything that you want to, anybody you want to call out, thank, anything? Obviously you got the podcast, please.
Yeah. My YouTube channel is this artistically freeing thing where I'm just exploring fighting, of course, and the techniques and tactics and stuff around fighting, but also philosophy. That's where I'm really at, is trying to find ways to use the lessons of martial arts to kind of live a better life myself. And hopefully some other people find that interesting. But it's YouTube/C/Robin Black. And I do want to shout out our very first sponsor. It's called Fierce Supply. They're a brand new clothing company in Canada. And they are sending my cameraman. I'm down in Dallas working 211 for UFC.com. And they're sending my cameraman down so we can shoot a bunch of stuff from UFC 211. And I got Jorge Masvidal. I'm giving him a ride to the airport on Sunday. Win or lose. I think he's going to beat Damian Maia. I really do. But win or lose, he's let me give him a ride to the airport and shoot an interview there. So I'm going to do a bunch of stuff from there. And then I'm going to Korea that day, heading to Korea.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I've been having it's been such a pleasure working for ACB in Russia and Monster Zim in Korea and making my living, exploring Europe and Asia and Russia and seeing how fighting is shared and consumed over there, and, then bringing that knowledge and experience back and putting on my YouTube channel. So it's been going really well, man. But so I hope people check that out. I'm Robin Black MMA on Twitter. And the same on Instagram, which I'm just starting to use a little bit more. Gary's staff, Gary's creative team, we're like, dude, you got to use Instagram. That's how human beings share ideas. But it's been really fun, man. And let's do way sooner for part 3. Like sooner,
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be as long. I mean, I had Bruce on much quicker, and I was very fortunate. And he, I don't know. I mean, I'm not calling the man a liar. But he did say that he remembered me the first time around, and that's why he agreed to come on so quick. Now, I don't know if that's true. I feel like he might have been saying that to be nice to me, but if that is true, that made my life.
This is so. If for people who are in podcasting who have listened through to 1 minute and 10 seconds, or an hour and 10 minutes. Sorry, my math goofy. If you do podcasting, there is that right balance, and it's usually done by people with a good personality and like you have it, and the right balance between being the right amount of persistence and you're persistent because you know that it's easier the second time. We're like, oh yeah, that was really fun, I got to get back on this podcast and catch up. But even the first time, the right amount of persistence, you are going to feel a little weird the third time you send the note or the fourth time you send it. But you're going to have to go through the feeling of weird to be persistent enough to get Bruce Buffer on or to get Chael Sonnen on or to get whoever on. You're just going to have to go through that feeling. Once you do it once, it's going to be about whether you did a great job or not. And if you did a great job, and you do, Bruce will go on a second time. I'm happy to go on a third time. This is the job. Job number 1, persistent and deal with the feeling that you feel annoying. Job number 2, kick so much ass that it's easy the second time. That's what you get.
The hard one now is Michael Landsberg. The man's my great white whale at this point.
Dude, I'm literally interviewing Michael Landsberg tomorrow.
Can you slip a note into his briefcase?
No. What do you call? I'm serious. What do you want me to tell him? And I will tell him. So I'm going to his house tomorrow. So I do a series called Artists of Life, on my YouTube channel where I talk to people about kind of building life the way they want to build it. And often connected to fighting if possible, but and Landsberg's a friend, and I'm going to his house literally tomorrow at 3 p.m. Right now I'm talking to you. Eastern time, it's 7 p.m. So this is in 3 p.m., 7 p.m., 7 a.m., 12. This is in 20 hours, 19 hours.
So you're like really soon.
Yeah, 19 hours. What do you want me to tell him? I'll make this happen.
I would say tell him that because him and I had talked before, he was going to come on right before Christmas. He wound up going on vacation. We tried to reconnect. It just one of those things, just keeps slipping on by. And then I've sent him a couple more messages. I haven't got a response. I don't want to be annoying. I would say tell him that although I am an MMA podcast, that I don't even want to talk to him about MMA. Right. I want to talk about sick, not weak. I want to talk about depression. I want to talk about anxiety. I've lived with anxiety my whole life. So, and I've managed to, I think, master it. And I want to kind of talk to him about that and talk to our listeners about stuff that I've done to be able to really wrangle in having anxiety and I've had panic attacks in public places while being recorded. I mean, it's a tough thing. So, I mean, I want to get him on because I think he's an authority on the subject. And I do, of course, want to talk to him about his interviewing techniques because I do find them fascinating. But I think he probably thinks that, like a lot of the MMA podcasts that have reached out, they all want to talk about the same stuff, but I'm not that kind of person. So
I just DM'd you my email.
Perfect.
So email me yours, and then I'll mention it tomorrow. But, he may have 27 partial conversations, and he might not know it. So you're going to email me, and then I'm going to email intro you and say, please go on his podcast.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Robin, you are the man. I held you too long. Enjoy yourself, and we'll get you back on soon.
Yeah, cheers, my friend. And watch for that email intro to Landsberg. He's a real good human being. You'll love him. You guys will have a great chat.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, wait, and you're going to say goodbye.
I am, yeah. All right, guys. Catch us, I guess this interview is coming out Friday. There's nothing next week either, so I'll be just posting up some interviews. We'll do another news episode.
Landsberg next week.
Oh, that would be great. That would be my, he's like, I'm telling you, man, he's my great white whale, so that's my Moby Dick, is Michael Landsberg at this point. And then I'll get my eyes set on Chael, but I wanted to get Landsberg first, and then we'll go to Chael after that. So, alrighty. Tune in next week, guys.
The host of the LoudMouth MMA podcast, Kyle Steele. Executive producer and head of marketing, Philip Herman. Today's episode was mixed by Danny Adams, myself. Special thanks to the MMA Prophet, Sean I. Has, Dave Madden, Keith from the MMA Takeover, and The Voball. To learn more about the LoudMouth MMA podcast, please visit loudmouthmma.com.